The stars outside the great palace of the alien kingdom burned with a cold blue light. The halls of the palace were tall, wide, and filled with shadows. Every step echoed like thunder on the stone floors. The alien king sat upon his throne, heavy with golden armor that seemed more like a burden than a crown. His eyes, dark and tired, were fixed on one figure standing before him, his only daughter. She was fragile compared to others of her kind. Her body was thin, her skin pale, her movements weak. The court whispered whenever she passed. Some said she was cursed. Others laughed and said the king had been punished by the gods for his pride. She had no great strength, no talent with weapons, no gift of command. In a world where power was everything, she was seen as nothing. The king loved his daughter, but he was ashamed too. The galaxy was burning with war. Enemies pressed closer every day. His people demanded a strong heir, a warrior to lead them. But all he had was a daughter who could not even lift a sword. The burden tore at him, and the whispers in his court grew louder. On that day, the king stood up and raised his hand for silence. His voice was heavy, slow, and filled with pain. "My people," he said, "I cannot give you the daughter you wish for. She is not strong enough to protect this kingdom. She is not ready to lead when I am gone." The hall was filled with nods and quiet murmurs. The courtiers looked at the princess with pity and with scorn. She lowered her head, her heart heavy with shame. "But," the king continued, his voice sharp, "I have found a way. I will not give her to one of our warriors. I will not give her to the empires that circle us like beasts. Instead, I will give her to a human." The hall exploded in outrage. Shouts rose in anger. "A human!" one elder barked. "They are weak, primitive," another cried. "They are not even worthy to stand before us." The princess lifted her head in shock. A human? She had heard of them. Creatures from a small world, shorter than her people, fragile, and often underestimated. Why would her father send her to one of them? The king raised his hand again, silencing the room. His voice cut through the noise. "You call them weak, but I have seen with my own eyes what a human can do. I have seen them fight when there was no hope. I have seen them rise after being broken. Where we depend on power, they depend on will. Where we depend on tradition, they depend on courage. A human has something my daughter does not, and only with them she may find her strength." The princess felt her chest tighten. Her father's words were like knives. To be given away, to be passed like a burden to another, was humiliation. She could not meet the eyes of the court as they whispered and laughed at her. She wanted to cry, but no tears came. She stood there, silent, as her father declared her fate. Later, when the hall was empty, she stood before her father alone. Her voice trembled as she asked, "Do you not believe in me?" The king looked at her, and his hard mask softened. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Daughter, I have always believed in you. But belief is not enough. I fear I have failed you. I cannot give you strength with my hands. Perhaps the human can give you what I could not." Her heart was heavy. She wanted to scream that she was not weak, but deep inside she knew the truth. She had failed in every test. She had been mocked all her life. She had never been more than a shadow in the halls of power. The day came when the human arrived. He was not dressed in gold or silver. His armor was plain, his eyes sharp, and his movements calm. Compared to the towering alien guards, he looked small, almost unimportant. Yet when he walked into the throne room, the space seemed to change. He carried himself with a quiet strength that needed no shouting, no display of power. The courtiers sneered. "This is the one? This human will protect her? This human will train her?" Madness. The human ignored them. He walked straight to the princess and bowed his head slightly. His voice was firm but gentle when he spoke. "You do not know me," he said, "but I know enough about you. They call you weak. They say you cannot fight. They believe you are nothing, but I do not believe them." She looked at him in surprise. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not even her father. The human reached out his hand. "I will not promise it will be easy. I will not promise it will be quick. But I promise you this. You will rise. You will fight. And one day, they will look at you not as the weak daughter of a king, but as a warrior the galaxy fears." For a moment, silence filled the throne room. The courtiers looked on with disbelief. The king watched with hope hidden deep in his eyes, and the princess, her heart pounding, slowly placed her hand in his. In that moment, something stirred within her, a small flame, weak but alive. It was not strength yet. It was not power. But it was the beginning of something greater. And as she left the throne room with the human, the whispers of the court followed her. Some laughed, some mocked, but some, for the first time, fell silent. They did not know it. But the galaxy had just witnessed the first step of a fragile daughter's transformation into the strongest warrior humanity would ever forge. The first steps of change, the journey to the human's world was long. The princess sat in silence inside the ship, staring at the stars outside. Her thoughts were heavy, her chest tight. She wondered if she was being punished. She wondered if her father had given her away because he truly believed she could never change. She felt like a broken piece being thrown aside. The human sat across from her, quiet, watching her without judgment. His eyes carried no mockery, no pity. When the silence grew too heavy, he finally spoke. "Do you know why your father gave you to me?" he asked. She shook her head, her voice small. "Because I am weak. Because I am ashamed to him." The human leaned forward. His tone was sharp, cutting through her despair. "No, he gave you to me because strength is not in your blood. It is not in your crown. It is not even in your body. It is in your will. That is what I will teach you." The words confused her. Will? She had heard of strength in muscles, in weapons, in armies. But will? That was something she had never understood. When they arrived at the human colony, it was nothing like the shining towers of her father's kingdom. The colony was small, made of steel and stone, surrounded by open fields and rough training grounds. There were no grand halls, no golden thrones. Instead, there were people moving with purpose, building, repairing, training. The princess felt out of place in her delicate clothes. The humans stared at her with curiosity, but no one bowed, no one whispered. They looked at her as if she were just another person. The human who had taken her, his name was Captain Darius, led her to a simple hut. Inside there was a bed, a table, and nothing else. "This is your home now," he said. "Here you will not be a princess. Here you will be a student." Her pride burned at his words. But she said nothing. She lowered her head, hiding the storm inside her. The next day, training began. At dawn, before the first light, Captain Darius woke her. He did not hand her a weapon. He did not take her to a battlefield. Instead, he told her to run. "Run?" she asked in disbelief. "Yes, run until your legs cannot carry you. Then run further." The first attempt ended quickly. Her legs gave out, her chest burned, and she collapsed in the dirt. The humans who trained nearby shook their heads. Some laughed quietly. She felt the shame rise again. But Darius did not laugh. He stood over her and said only, "Again!" Day after day, she was made to run, to lift, to push her body past its limits. Her hands blistered, her knees bled, her lungs ached. She cursed Darius in her heart. She hated the way the humans watched her struggle. She wanted to give up, but every time she fell, he made her rise. Every time she cried that she could not, he answered with the same steady voice. "You can. Your body lies, but your will is stronger. Stand up." At night, she would collapse onto her bed, her body trembling with pain. Tears would slip down her face in silence. She wondered how long she could endure. But when the morning came, she would rise again, though her body begged her to stop. Weeks passed, and something began to change. She still struggled, but she could run farther. She could lift heavier weights. Her steps were steadier. Her arms no longer trembled as much. The whispers of the humans softened. They began to watch her with interest instead of mockery. One evening, after a long day of training, Darius sat with her by the fire. His voice was calm as he spoke. "You are beginning to understand. Strength is not given to you. It is earned. And when it is earned, no one can take it away." She looked at her hands, rough and scarred, so different from the soft, untouched hands she once had in the palace. For the first time, she felt a flicker of pride. But her trials were not only in training. One night, the colony was attacked. A group of raiders from a rival alien clan stormed the outer gates, hoping to steal supplies. Alarms echoed across the colony. Humans rushed to arms. The princess froze in terror as she saw the chaos. Darius turned to her, his eyes sharp. "This is your moment. Fight or remain the weak girl they believe you are." He handed her a weapon, a simple blade. Her hands shook as she gripped it. Fear roared in her chest. She wanted to run, to hide. But when she saw the humans fighting with all their strength, protecting their homes, something stirred inside her. She remembered his words. "Your body lies, but your will is stronger." With a trembling breath, she stepped into the battle. Her first strike was clumsy. Her arms were weak, but the raider she faced was surprised. He had not expected resistance from her. She struck again, harder this time. The sound of steel against steel rang through the air. Her fear turned into fire. For the first time, she was not running. For the first time, she was standing her ground. When the battle ended, the colony stood victorious. The humans cheered. The raiders fled into the night. And the princess, her blade shaking in her hands, stood covered in sweat and dust, her chest heaving. The humans looked at her differently now. No longer with laughter, no longer with doubt. Some even nodded with respect. Darius approached her, his voice quiet but filled with pride. "You see, the moment you chose to fight, you were no longer weak." She dropped the blade, her hands trembling. Tears welled in her eyes. Not from fear this time, but from the knowledge that she had done something she never believed possible. In that moment, she realized something. She was not yet strong, not yet a warrior. But for the first time in her life, she believed she could become one. And that belief was the beginning of her true strength. The trial by fire. The days after the raid were different. The humans looked at the princess in a new way. They no longer saw her as a burden, but as someone who had stood beside them when danger came. Their nods of respect gave her a strange warmth inside. Yet she knew the fight had only been a beginning. Her hands had shaken, her strikes had been clumsy. She had survived, but survival was not victory. Captain Darius knew this too. Training became harder. He pushed her beyond the limits of her body and mind. At dawn, she ran until her lungs screamed. At dusk, she lifted weights until her muscles burned. At night, she practiced sword drills until the moon was high. She often collapsed in the dirt, but Darius would stand over her and say, again. At first she hated him for it, but slowly she understood. Every time she thought she could not continue, she discovered she could. Every time her body wanted to stop, her will carried her forward. One evening, while practicing with a wooden sword, she looked up at the stars above the colony. They seemed brighter than she remembered, as if the universe was watching her struggle. She whispered to herself, "I will not be weak. Not anymore." But her journey was not hidden from the galaxy. Word of her training reached her father's court. Some laughed and said she was playing warrior among the humans. Others whispered that she was being forged into something dangerous. The king himself listened in silence, but his heart was heavy with doubt. He wanted to believe, but belief alone could not silence the demands of his people. Weeks later, the king sent a message to Darius. His words were clear. Bring her home. If she has changed, she must prove it before the court. If she has not, she will be cast aside forever. When the message was read to her, the princess felt her chest tighten. The thought of returning filled her with both hope and fear. She wanted her father to see her strength, but she knew the court would mock her again. Still, she raised her head and said, "I will go. I will show them." Before leaving, Darius gave her one final lesson. They stood in the training ground at dusk, the sky painted red and gold. He placed a real sword in her hands. "This time," he said, "you will not fight an enemy. You will fight me." Her eyes widened. "You? But you are far stronger." "That is the point," he replied. The duel began. His strikes were fast and sharp, each one heavier than anything she had faced before. She struggled to block them. Sparks flew as steel met steel. Fear returned, whispering that she would fail. But each time she remembered his voice. "Your body lies. Your will is stronger." Her arms ached, her legs shook, but she did not fall. She pushed forward step by step, refusing to give in. Finally, she struck with a force she never thought she had. Her blade clashed against his, and for a brief moment, she held him back. When the fight ended, Darius lowered his weapon and smiled. "You are ready." The next day, they returned to the palace. The court was crowded, filled with nobles and warriors eager to see her failure. The king sat high on his throne, his face carved in stone. The princess walked into the hall, her head held higher than before. Whispers rose at once. "She looks stronger, but it is a trick. She cannot truly fight. This is a game." The king raised his hand for silence. His voice rang out. "My daughter has returned. She claims she has changed. She claims she has found strength. Today she will prove it. She will face our champion." The court roared with excitement. The champion was a giant of their people, a warrior known for crushing enemies in battle. His armor was thick, his sword heavy. When he stepped forward, the ground seemed to shake. The princess looked at him, fear crawling up her spine. He was everything she had once believed she could never be. Yet, as she gripped her sword, she remembered the fire in her heart. She remembered the humans who had looked at her with respect. She remembered Darius's voice. The duel began. The champion struck with raw power. The sound of steel against steel filled the hall. She staggered back, barely holding her ground. The court laughed. "She cannot last. This is a joke." But she did not fall. Each strike pushed her closer to the edge, yet she held firm. Her arms trembled, her breath came hard, but she refused to surrender. Slowly, she began to move with speed instead of strength. She dodged his blows, turned his weight against him, and struck where he was open. The laughter in the hall faded into silence. Eyes widened as she matched the champion strike for strike. At last, with a final burst of will, she disarmed him. His sword clattered to the floor. He fell to his knees, defeated. For a moment, the hall was frozen in silence. Then whispers spread like fire. "She won. She defeated him. The weak daughter of the king has defeated our strongest." The king stood, his eyes wide, his voice unsteady. You have done what I never believed possible." But before she could answer, a messenger burst into the hall, his face pale with fear. He shouted, "An enemy fleet approaches! They come to destroy us!" The court erupted in chaos. The king's face darkened. The princess tightened her grip on her sword, and with steady eyes she stepped forward. "Then let me lead." The throne room fell into silence after her words. The princess stood tall, her sword steady in her hand, her voice calm as she declared that she would lead the defense. The courtiers stared at her as if she had gone mad. Some laughed nervously, others shook their heads in disbelief. "She cannot lead an army," one elder spat. "She is still a child playing warrior," another said. "She will lead us to ruin." But the king did not answer them. His eyes were fixed on his daughter. In her face, he saw no fear, only fire. For the first time in his life, he saw not weakness, but the spirit of a leader. After a long silence, he rose from his throne. His voice carried across the hall. "Very well, let it be so. My daughter will command the defense." The words struck the court like a storm. Some shouted in anger, others in despair, but the king's decision was final. The princess bowed her head, not in shame, but in respect. Then she turned and walked from the hall, her steps firm, her eyes already on the battle to come. Outside, Captain Darius waited. He had listened to the chaos inside and now looked at her with calm eyes. "So," he said softly, "you have taken your place." She met his gaze. "If I cannot lead now, then everything you taught me means nothing. I will fight. I will protect my people." The enemy fleet arrived within days. Dark ships filled the skies above the kingdom, their weapons glowing with deadly light. Panic spread through the city. Families fled into shelters. Soldiers readied themselves with fear in their hearts. The princess stood before them all, armor on her shoulders, sword at her side. Her voice rang out clear across the ranks. "My people, you know me. You know my weakness. You have seen me stumble. You have seen me mocked. But today you will see something different. Today you will see what a human has taught me, that strength is not in the body but in the will. And my will not break." The soldiers listened in silence. They had doubted her for years, but now something in her voice stirred their hearts. Slowly, one by one, they raised their weapons and shouted her name. The battle began. Enemy ships rained fire from the skies. The princess led her forces with courage, her voice steady even when the ground shook. She directed the fleets with speed and precision, surprising even the oldest generals. Where others hesitated, she acted. Where others saw defeat, she saw opportunity. In the chaos of war, she fought not only with her sword, but with her spirit. When soldiers faltered, she was there to lift them. When the lines broke, she stepped into the front. The enemy expected a fragile girl, but they faced a commander who fought with the fire of humanity burning inside her. On the ground, the enemy poured through the gates. The clash of steel and screams filled the air. The princess fought among her soldiers, blade flashing, her movements sharp and swift. Fear still whispered inside her, but she did not let it control her. Every strike she made was a promise. To her father, to her people, to herself, that she was no longer the weak daughter of the king. The courtiers who had once mocked her now watched from the safety of the walls. Their eyes widened as they saw her cut through enemy after enemy, her soldiers rallying around her. The king himself stood at the tower, his heart pounding. Pride and sorrow mixed in his chest, for he knew he might lose his daughter this day. But he also knew she had become something greater than he had ever dreamed. As the battle raged, the enemy commander stepped forward. He was a giant, armored in black steel, his weapon a blade as tall as a man. His voice boomed across the battlefield. "Princess, come and face me! Let us see if you are truly what they say." The soldiers gasped. To face him was certain death. Even the strongest warriors had fallen before him. But the princess did not hesitate. She stepped forward, sword in hand, her voice steady. "I will face you." The duel began. The commander struck with brutal power, each blow heavy enough to shatter shields. The princess staggered under the force, but she did not fall. She moved with speed, dodging, countering, striking when she could. The ground shook beneath their clash, the air filled with sparks of steel. Every strike pushed her closer to the edge, but she remembered Darius's words. "Your body lies, your will is stronger." She called upon every lesson, every moment of pain, every tear shed in training. Her arms ached, her breath burned, but her will blazed like fire. At last, with one final strike, she turned his weight against him. Her blade cut through his guard and struck true. The commander fell, his massive form crashing into the dirt. The battlefield went silent. For a moment, even the enemy stood frozen in shock. Then the soldiers of the kingdom roared in triumph. The enemies, leaderless and broken, began to flee. The princess stood over the fallen commander, her chest heaving, her sword dripping with dust and blood. Her soldiers knelt before her, shouting her name. For the first time, they did not see her as weak, but as their warrior, their leader. From the tower, the king watched with tears in his eyes. His voice was a whisper only he could hear. "Forgive me, my daughter. I was blind. You are greater than I ever believed." But the battle was not yet over. Though the commander was dead, the fleet still loomed in the skies, preparing for a final strike that could wipe out the city in flames. The princess lifted her sword high, her voice ringing clear. "This is not the end. Follow me, and we will show the galaxy that we are unbroken." Her soldiers rose as one, their courage ignited. The fire of humanity, born in her heart, spread across them all, and as the fleet descended, the princess prepared for the final war that would decide not just her fate, but the fate of her people. Humanity's strongest warrior. The sky was a sea of fire. The enemy fleet hovered above the city, their weapons glowing with deadly light, ready to rain destruction. The people below trembled, their hope fragile despite the victory on the ground. They looked to the princess, their last spark of courage. She stood in the heart of the army, her sword raised, her armor battered but unbroken. Her body ached from the duel with the enemy commander, but her will burned brighter than ever. Around her, soldiers waited, their eyes locked on her, waiting for her voice. She spoke, her words steady, clear, carrying across the battlefield. "They thought I was weak. They thought this kingdom would fall. But today we rise. Today they will learn that no weapon, no empire, no fleet can crush a will that refuses to break. Follow me, and we will not only survive, we will triumph." A roar answered her, thousands of voices united as one. The sound shook the earth. Even the king, standing high in his tower, felt the power of her words and clenched his fists with pride. The princess led the charge. Ships launched into the sky, their engines blazing. Fighters streaked through the clouds, meeting the enemy head-on. Explosions lit the heavens as steel clashed against fire. The princess boarded a command vessel, taking her place at the helm. Darius stood at her side, silent but watchful, his eyes filled with pride. The enemy fleet unleashed its fury. Beams of light tore through the sky, crashing into shields, ripping through towers. The city shook, the ground cracked, but the princess did not falter. She gave orders with sharp precision, moving her fleets like blades cutting through the dark. "Strike their wings! Break their formation! Do not let them surround us!" she commanded. Her forces obeyed, striking with courage. For every ship that fell, 2 more rose in its place, inspired by her voice. The humans who had once doubted her now fought with fire in their hearts. Alien warriors who once mocked her now followed her every command without hesitation. But the enemy was vast, their fleet a storm that seemed endless. Fear began to creep back into the hearts of her soldiers. Explosions rocked the command ship, alarms blared, voices cried out in panic. The princess gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles white. She looked at the faces around her, frightened, desperate, and her heart ached. She remembered her own fear, the years she had been mocked, the moments she had believed she was nothing, and she remembered the voice of Darius. "Your body lies, but your will is stronger." She stood tall, her voice rising above the chaos. "Look at me! I was once weaker than all of you. I was once the one who could not even hold a sword, but I stand here now because I refuse to surrender. If I can rise, so can you. Fight with me! Do not fear the storm! Be the storm!" Her words struck deep. The despair in her soldiers' eyes turned to fire. They roared with new strength, pushing forward with ferocity. The tide began to turn. The princess herself joined the fray. She took to a smaller fighter, leading squadrons into the thick of battle. Her ship darted between enemy fire, striking from angles no one expected. She fought not only with skill, but with courage that seemed impossible. Each victory she won inspired hundreds more. The enemy fleet began to falter. Their lines broke. Their ships fell one by one. The princess pressed harder, refusing to give them a chance to recover. At last, only the enemy flagship remained, towering above the battlefield like a mountain of steel. Its weapons glowed, ready to unleash one final strike that could destroy the city. The princess knew what she had to do. She spoke into the comms, her voice calm. "Cover me. I will take the flagship myself," the soldiers cried out in shock. "It's suicide! No one can face that ship alone." But Darius's voice came through, steady as ever. "If anyone can, it is her. Protect her path." The fleets opened a corridor, their fire cutting a way through. The princess's fighter shot forward, weaving through beams of death, flames licking at her wings. She aimed straight for the flagship's heart. The enemy ship unleashed its full fury, but she did not waver. Her hands were steady, her eyes sharp. At the last moment, she released a storm of fire, her weapons striking the flagship's core. The ship shuddered, groaned, and then erupted in a blinding explosion. The sky turned white with light. When the fire cleared, the flagship was gone, broken into fragments, falling like burning stars. Silence fell across the battlefield. Then, slowly, cheers rose, growing louder and louder until the entire kingdom roared in triumph. The enemy fled, their will broken. The kingdom stood victorious. The princess landed her fighter and stepped onto the ground, her armor scorched, her face streaked with sweat and ash. Her people fell to their knees, bowing before her. Soldiers chanted her name, their voices echoing through the ruined city. The king descended from his tower, his steps heavy with emotion. He stood before his daughter, his eyes wet with tears. His voice trembled as he spoke. "My child, no, my warrior, forgive me for ever doubting you. Today you are not only my daughter, you are the defender of this kingdom. You are the strongest warrior our people have ever known." The princess bowed her head, her voice quiet but filled with fire. "I was weak, father, but humanity taught me what true strength is, and I will never let this strength die." From that day forward, her name was spoken across the stars. She was no longer the fragile daughter of a king. She was the human-forged warrior, the commander who had broken empires and inspired both human and alien alike. Her story spread through the galaxy, whispered in courts, sung in streets, carried by soldiers who had fought at her side. Some feared her, others revered her, but none could deny the truth. She had become a symbol of will, of courage, of the unbreakable spirit of humanity. And though the wars would never truly end, the galaxy would never again look at her and see weakness. They would look and see a warrior,